let me throw this, and then I'm going to open it up to the committee members, so we can sort of, not that we're creating policy, but we're speaking openly about the UC admissions process. If in fact, and I do believe it is the fact that, zip codes and school districts and demographics throughout the state of California will determine in practicality if you're eligible or if you're even admitted to the University of California, for that matter, any other school of higher education. If you have School District A, and School District A provides a whole array of AP classes, honor classes, and the weighted formula system for your GPA and all the extracurricular activities that are provided and the extra support services for SAT. And there's a tradition, like you said, there's a pipeline, if you will, from this school district, from the zip code to UC Berkeley, UCLA, or for that matter, any other UC. And then let's say, for example, South LA, say Lincoln Heights, Huntington Park, Logan Heights. We know that the challenge has been, for a whole variety of reasons, not enough AP classes. So we already know from the get-go that application, that student may have the moxie, may have the intelligence, but on paper, it doesn't demonstrate the same GPA grade level or GPA grade point average than the other students. So you already know that coming in already. Does that mean, does the UC system wait until there is a level playing field out there whenever that happens in the future, whether the legislature, us, continue to move forward on policy, or the legislature, us, continue to invest more dollars, K through 12, Prop 98, or does the UC regents start formulating different types of policy, taking into consideration the inequities that already exist in our public school system today? In short, obviously, I'm going to take a gamble in what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say University of California at Berkeley, University of California at Irvine, I believe your Cal State University, Humboldt State, or if I'm correct. Statistically speaking, University of California at Santa Barbara, I've had my challenges. Obviously, I was kicked out or dropped out. It's up to interpretation. For folks, I ended up at the Claremont Colleges, a private institution, later on. If it wasn't for certain types of programs, whether it was EOP, what was pre-209 era, that allowed folks not to follow the criteria, A through G, GPA, SAT scores, and so forth, and take into consideration other variables, other factors that say, there's something about this person. Doesn't fit the GPA scores, doesn't fit the AP classes, honor classes, doesn't have the SAT scores, but there's something about this individual we believe if we crowd this individual with the support services, he or she will be an amazing contribution to our economy and just grow as an individual. Now, obviously, in a post-209 era, that's not the case, and it's always been a legal challenge. How do you deal with this issue? So what is there a role for UC regents to recalibrate the criteria for admissions?
So this is a really crucial and very complicated question. And part of it is because admissions policy is significantly established by the Academic Senate and not by the Board of Regents. So much in the way that there is autonomy between UC and the legislature and the governor, even within the UC system, there's a shared governance structure, which puts the majority of the admissions-related questions within the Academic Senate, not within the Board of Regents. However, there are also some questionable assumptions behind the question. The reality was that in a pre-Prop 209 world, a student that was admitted through the affirmative action program was UC eligible. The preference they got was to campus of choice and major of choice, but they had to be UC eligible to begin with. So, in a post-Prop 209 world, one of the ways in which you can increase the representation of underrepresented students, whether it be based on race or socioeconomic status, is to get to a place where you expand the number of in-state slots that are available at the campuses. Because as you get closer and closer to the promise of funding and we have to argue about what the appropriate funding level is on a per pupil basis. But once you get to the level of funding that allows for, and quite frankly, restrictions on out-of-state and international students, but once you change the number of spots that are available, it changes the pool. And
Enlarges the pool.
right, enlarges the pool. Now, what UC has done is changed admissions policies so that it is not all numbers driven. There are some students for which the numbers play a lesser and greater role, and there is a broader read of files. But again, there's a question, how many should be just top down based on academic performance, especially when we know the inconsistency of access to certain course offerings, and especially when psychometricians have raised questions about the predictive value of SAT scores. So there should be a healthy argument about what you do above the line and how many seats are available and how that helps you expand your pool.
Well, I think it has to do with both issues. Obviously, the expansion of the slots itself is a budgetary question, number one, and that's something that hopefully, knock on wood, that we can really discuss in the upcoming budget fiscal negotiations, expansion of slots. But the expansion of slots in itself don't guarantee that these students of these zip codes will actually get, it may have the unintended consequence by expanding the slots itself, that you will continue to perpetuate the same cycle of pipeline from certain zip codes to the UC system.
So the second question then becomes the outreach to express possibility for folks who don't know what possibility exists.
Exactly.
And the question becomes what things can be done through a public-private partnership that are not limited by Prop 209 that allow you to do some of that outreach. I'll give you an example. UCLA, UC Berkeley, Stanford, and Caltech have a joint National Institutes of Science grant to do outreach to get underrepresented students into graduate programs in STEM fields. And so there's federal money and private money in partnership with those public and private institutions to do aggressive outreach in a way that wouldn't be allowed under a purely state-funded program because of Prop 209. So the question becomes, as we have these foundations on different campuses, what modeling you can do based on those kinds of successful programs and also apply it for undergraduate admissions.
So in short, if I hear you correctly, they have to work in tandem with each other. The outreach component, whether it's foundation 501c3 or federal dollars, that doesn't run foul of 209 on the outreach with their specific focus and goal in certain zip codes, and whether you're poor white or Latino African American, throughout poor Asian, middle income, lower, and then the issue of the expansion of slots, because they have to work in tandem with each other. And the expansion of slots obviously is a budgetary issue, and it's something that unquestionably that we have to tackle, us as collectively as a legislative body. Why don't, I'm going to open up to the members of the Rules Committee, and we'll come back around for another round. But before we do that, we know we have the great Das Williams from the Golden Coast of Santa Barbara, who I believe wanted to introduce or make some introductory remarks, and
Sure.
Well, we welcome you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem, for allowing me to get back so I can vote on your bills. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to support the confirmation of all three of these fine gentlemen, but I particularly wanted to speak a word about Eloy Ortiz-Oakley. He's someone known to our area. He served before Long Beach at Oxnard, and we remember him. We remember him because he is unorthodox, and orthodoxy is something that must be struggled against in our higher institutions if we are to achieve the goals of raising enrollment and preserving quality at the same time. And importantly, I'd like to recognize Eloy for being the co-founder of the Long Beach College Promise Partnership, recognized by the White House as a national model for pre-K to higher ed partnerships, which is helping local students earn degrees and certificates in preparation for rewarding lives and careers. And senators, I think you have three enormously qualified people here, and if I can boil it down to one reason why they are needed is we do need applicants to these positions who are going to have the courage and the knowledge to tackle things a little bit differently and to resist orthodoxy and come up with solutions that are good for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. Thank you so very much. And the word that stood out for me was unorthodox, which sometimes means you can be unusual too. So with that, let's open up to the Rules Committee members. We'll start with Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pro Tem. Let me start by saying for me, and thanking you once again for allowing me to serve on this committee. As I've said to you previously, serving on Rules Committee for me is a source of deep personal pride. As a native Angelino, as a woman of color, and I think today is a perfect kind of example of why it is for me to have the opportunity to engage in discussion and ultimately cast a vote on the confirmation of 3 men of color, as you astutely observed, sir, whose reputations precede them.
And also, too, the visuals are very obvious. So
Yeah, yeah, but not everyone would have the courage to say it out loud, sir, quite frankly. So I tip my hat to you. Whose reputations precede them, and whatever anyone might say about you gentlemen, I think it was summed up very nicely in Assemblymember Williams' comment that it is your history of leadership. It is your history of courage. It is your history of pushing the envelopes, all three of you, that gives me a high level of confidence that won't be characteristics foreign to you once you serve on the UC Board of Regents, which will be critically important for just the kinds of issues the Pro Tem raised. If I could add one more element, I think, to the question raised by the Pro Tem with regard to black students and whether or not they accept admission to UC. I hope that the study UC San Diego does also interviews black students who do accept admission. The powerfully troubling video the young black men from UCLA filmed about their experience on that campus, both athletes and students, spoke volumes to the experience of black students who do accept admission. And as we know, conversation and advice from our peers, for all of us, has huge influence on decisions we make. And so they may be, in many instances, the cause that students don't follow them to UC because of that isolation, because of that lack of support, because of the campus climate. And so I hope that those students are also interviewed and given the opportunity to speak. I agree with all the points that the Pro Tem raised. I think there are additional barriers to access that I'd like to hear you all talk a little bit about, given your role and the unique governance role of the UC Board of Regents for underrepresented students. As I said to Mr. Oakley as we spoke and he shared his personal story, I asked him if he thought in 2015 a student fitting his exact profile could or would be admitted to a UC campus today. When I consider the following, I said on the floor the other day that I thought I was born too late. In this instance, I sure am glad I'm not trying to get into UC today. There are clear structural, institutional barriers. I have 2 high schools in the district I represent that are a stone's throw away from UCLA. And so it's not this great kind of geographical divide that we talked about. These are schools that are walking distance, literally, from UCLA, that when I was first elected to the Assembly offered no AP classes. They also happen to be the 2 remaining high schools in LAUSD that are predominantly African American. They do offer some today, but certainly not the offerings at many other campuses. But for a number of years, they offered none. The College Board president came up and met with me here in the legislature a couple of years ago acknowledging the College Board's own shortcoming in terms of the number of African American students who are admitted into AP classes if you're lucky enough to live in a community or go to a school that offers them, and that there's a disconnect in terms of the number of black students admitted to AP classes. The new issue with Casey and whether or not kids are going to be able to apply to a college if they don't take the test. Math misplacement, an issue brought to my attention by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, where kids who successfully pass algebra in the 8th grade with a B or better are then asked to repeat math, algebra again in 9th grade, which compromises their ability to get to advanced math so they can meet the A through G pattern. So as we talk about slots and all of these issues that do fall pretty squarely in the Board of Regents lane and the legislatures, there are other structural, institutional issues that are preventing children from getting there that reflects complete and utter bias. And so how do we begin together as Californians to address those critical issues? And I've just named 4 or 5 that I could think of sitting here. And I'm sure there are countless others. Geographic, there are countless others that keep students from getting into the publicly funded institution that their parents and grandparents pay taxes to support.
Well, Senator Mitchell, I mean, that is a very fundamental question, not just in California, but throughout the nation. And it's a question that we have not been able to answer as an education community adequately. Having said that, it is incumbent upon us to take this issue on head on. You know, the fact of the matter is there are qualified, very bright African-American, Latino, Cambodian, you name it, students in all of these communities. We have to find a better way of finding the talent in these communities, creating a pathway where these students and their families feel like the UC is actually within reach. You know, too many of our students, and I see this at Long Beach, and we are a very diverse community, too many students default to the CSU. And not because the CSU is a bad choice, but the CSU has done a wonderful job of making it clear to all students, particularly middle and low-income students, that it's a place for them. We need to do the same thing in the University of California. Now, University of California doesn't have the same capacity as CSU, but we should do much more. The other thing is, you know, the way that we look at talent and the way we measure whether or not someone is college ready are issues that we need to question as a board. Yes, much of that authority is delegated to our very well-qualified and well-meaning faculty, but the region should be asking those questions. There's got to be better ways of measuring whether or not a student has the capacity to succeed in the University of California other than the typical way that we measure it now, which is SAT scores or other standardized test scores along with GPA. And as you said, those measures are biased toward communities where the school districts have applied resources to ensure those students get those resources. So, I mean, I would look to my experience in Long Beach and the Long Beach College Promise, the commitment that we have to every single student, regardless of what their background is, that we will hold a space for them in college. And if they come to the California Community College, the Long Beach City College, we're going to ensure that we do everything we can to build a pathway to CSU Long Beach, and CSU Long Beach commits to holding a spot for them. We need to start engaging in the same kind of broad thinking in the University of California. We are the leaders of the public higher education system, and we need to ensure that we provide leadership in this area. We've got to find a better way, and I think I'm committed to continuing to raise this question meeting after meeting until we get somewhere.